What are you willing to sacrifice just to reach your dreams? Hello, and welcome back to the story. Today, we will be making a recap of a 2021 movie titled Last Night in Soho. Warning, there will be some spoilers ahead, so watch at your own risk and enjoy. The story begins with a girl named Ellie dancing through her room when she accidentally hit the picture of her mother who has passed away. She has the ability to see her mother's ghost through the mirror. Her grandmother hands her a letter from the London College of Fashion. Ellie gets ecstatic when she finds out she has been accepted. That evening, Ellie packs up and we can see that she is very fond of 60s fashion and music. Her grandmother tells her to look out for herself because there are bad men in London. Next morning, Ellie takes a train to London and while riding a taxi, she gets creeped out by the driver who's been making inappropriate comments. So she asks him to stop, and she gets out. When she sees the taxi is no longer there, she walks to her dormitory. She meets her roommate Jocasta, who introduces her to the other girls. Ellie reveals that her mother had a mental illness and killed herself. They seem to be nice to her and they later go out to a pub. Ellie is in the bathroom when she overhears Jocasta mocking her and says she will soon end up like her mother. Ellie leaves and on her way to the dorm, she sees an old guy getting out of a brothel. He smiles at her and leaves. While Ellie is trying to sleep, Jocasta comes in bringing a guy from the pub. Ellie leaves the room and downstairs she finds that a party is going on. A guy named John tries to befriend her, but she rejects him. Next morning, Ellie wakes up late, so she rushes to her class. A while later, she finds an advert for a room to rent. Ellie decides to check it out since she is not comfortable at the dormitory. The landlady Ms. Collins tells her the house rules and shows Ellie her room. Ellie says it is perfect and she loves it. That evening, Ellie moves to her new room. She plays an old song and gets to sleep. She later finds herself in the 1960s, where she enters a theater club, and inside, she sees her reflection as Sandy, a confident blonde woman. Ellie watches the events through her. Sandy is aspiring to be a singer. She asks for the owner so she could apply as the main performer, but the bartender says he is not around. He tells her that in the meantime, she can speak with Jack because he manages a lot of girls. Sandy later talks with him. Jack asks if she is willing to work her way up, and she says of course. Jack dances with her and we can see that Ellie is also enjoying it. Jack tells her that it would take her a very long time before she could perform on that stage, so he says he will give her a gig in the meantime. While Jack is away to get her a drink, a rude customer starts harassing her and calls her a whore. Jack punches him down and they run away. They make out in the phone booth, which is also happening with Ellie. While Jack is driving her home, Sandy says all she wanted in her life is to be on stage and Jack says better things are yet to come. Sandy is happy and so is Ellie. Sandy later arrives at her room and it is the same room as Ellie is staying in. When Ellie tries to touch Sandy who is sleeping in her bed, she wakes up back to the present. At school, Ellie draws the dress that Sandy was wearing. Jocasta notices the kiss mark on Ellie's neck and she remembers it was the part that Jack was kissing. That night, Ellie is excited to sleep again and now, she's back to the 60s. Jack brings her to a theater called Rialto, where they meet the owner to audition. Sandy sings beautifully and the owner is impressed. Sandy is so happy and she thanks Jack. He asks for her real name, and she says Alexandra. They make out, and Ellie wakes up back to the present. Ellie dyes her hair to make it look like Sandy. At the school, she starts working on her design and the teacher is impressed. Later that day, Ellie goes to a pub and applies for a job. She sees the old man from the other night and he smiles at her again. The old man follows her outside and Ellie is uncomfortable. The old man says he is not trying to pick her up, she just looks familiar to him. She gets scared and walks away. That night, Ellie sleeps and returns to Rialto in 1960s. But this time, she sees that Sandy is just a backup dancer on stage, and Ellie seems disappointed. She later sees Sandy looking mad in her dressing room. Jack bangs on the door and he tells her that she is not done yet. Jack introduces her to an old customer and tells Sandy to come with him. She gets mad and walks away. Jack tells her that if she really wanted to make as a performer, she needs to make these men happy. Sandy runs away, and we can see that other performers are also giving pleasures to the men. When she reaches her room, Ellie finds Sandy lying in bed naked, with money beside her, and the old man getting out of the bathroom. Ellie wakes up mad as she smashes the alarm. Later at school, she crumples her drawing and rips the dress. Her teacher calms her down and gives her back her drawing. At the pub, John chats with her because he noticed she was upset at school. He tells her that she can always talk with him. Outside, Ellie sees the old man again, and he calls her by her name. Ellie asks why he know her name, and the old man says it is his business to know all the pretty girls around there. He asks her if she smokes. When Ellie says no, he says he must be thinking of some other blonde. In her bedroom, Ellie tries not to sleep, but she later finds herself back in the 60s. She sees Sandy being pulled by Jack to the club, and tells her to start working. For different nights, Sandy dances and entertains different men using different names. One night, she meets a man who tells her to get out while she can because she deserves better. Sandy does not listen to his advice, and we find out that the man is a police who has been helping girls like Sandy get out of prostitution. Ellie wakes up and sees ghosts of different men. She runs outside panting, and when she opens back the door, the ghosts are no longer there. She looks at the mirror relieved, but when she looks back at the room, Ellie does not want to go home and stays at school late at night. John invites her to a Halloween party, and she quickly says yes. At the party, Jocasta gives them a drink that must have been drugged. Ellie drinks it and later starts dancing. She is having fun with John, until she sees the ghosts again. She also sees Sandy dancing, and when she approaches her, she disappears. She runs outside and is still hallucinating. John follows her and makes her calm down. She kisses him and they make out until they reach her room. On the bed, Ellie sees through the overhead mirror that Jack is trying to kill Sandy. She starts screaming, "Get off her," and John gets worried. Miss Collins hears them and tells John to get out. Ellie is still screaming, looking at Jack who is stabbing Sandy to death. Miss Collins turns on the light and asks her if John hurt her. Ellie says no and the landlady says they need to talk about it tomorrow. Next morning, Ellie says sorry to Miss Collins, and she asks her if a girl named Sandy died in her room. The landlady is sarcastic and says many people have died in different places over the years. At the school, while finishing the dress she has designed, she sees Sandy who is blooded all over. She freaks out and runs away. She sees the ghost of men on the hallway and through the streets. She bumps into Jack, but it turns out to be the old man from the pub. She runs to the police station and reports the murder in her room, but the officer is confused because it was just her vision from the past. She says that Sandy was murdered by her pimp named Jack, and she believes it is the old man who keeps on following her. At the bathroom, Ellie overhears the police laugh about her, thinking that she's gone mad. Ellie goes to the library to do her own research. She tries to look for articles about a murdered girl in the 60s, but instead, she finds a number of reports on different missing men. She gets interrupted and sees the men ghosts all around the library. Ellie runs away and goes to the pub, where she sees the old man waiting for her. Ellie opens her recorder app, hoping to tape a confession from him. She asks him about Sandy and the man says he knows her, and whatever happened to her, she brought it on herself. Ellie breaks down, saying he killed Sandy. The old man leaves and says it was Alex who killed Sandy. Ellie runs after him, and he tells her that if she sees Alex, say hello for him. The old man gets accidentally hit by a taxi and dies. The pub owner says his name is Lindsay, an ex-police, who has been helping girls for years to escape prostitution. Ellie realizes he is not Jack, but rather the man who tried to help Sandy. Ellie wants to go back to her grandmother, and she asks John for help. She goes to Miss Collins to ask for her deposit back. The landlady gives her tea and says a policewoman came by because Ellie reported about a girl murdered in her room. Miss Collins says a girl did die there, the young her. When Ellie looks at the piled letters in the table, she finds out that her first name is Alexandra, and realizes that Miss Collins is Sandy. Miss Collins narrates how different men use her every night, and says that's how Sandy died in that room 100 times. She says Jack stole her dream and put her in that misery, that's why she put a knife in him 100 times. She also confesses that she killed all the men who have used her and hid their bodies in the floor. Miss Collins later admits that the tea she gave to Ellie is poisoned and she starts suffering pain. John comes ringing through the door and Miss Collins gets a knife to stab him. Ellie tries to stand up and accidentally topples the table with cigarettes, which started a fire. Miss Collins lets John come in, and Ellie shouts, but it's too late. Miss Collins chases her as she tries to climb upstairs, and Ellie can see her as the young Sandy. She manages to reach the room where the ghosts of Sandy's victim pull her to the floor, and they beg her to kill Sandy. Miss Collins comes in the room, and she is shocked to see the ghosts of Jack and the men. Jack slaps her and they are gone. The fire has reached upstairs, and Ellie tries to save Sandy, but she chooses to stay and tells Ellie to save herself and John. Ellie runs away and sees Miss Collins waiting to be scorched by the flames. Ellie and John are able to escape the house. Months later, Ellie's collection of dresses inspired by the 60s are showcased during a college fashion show, and everyone is impressed, including her grandmother. At the dressing room, she sees the ghost of her mother again, who looks proud at her. Her grandma congratulates her and says that her mother would be so proud of her. Ellie says she is, and when she looks back to the mirror to see her mother, she sees Sandy waving at her. Did you like our movie recap? Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. To be updated for new movie recaps, hit the notification bell.